in motion, then I say, you've seen Jesus my Lord. Have you seen Jesus my Lord? He's here in plain view. Take a look, open your eyes, he'll show it to you. Have you ever stood at the sunset with the sky bellowing red, seen the clouds suspended like feathers? Then I say, you've seen Jesus my Lord. Have you seen Jesus my Lord? He's here in plain view. Take a look, open your eyes, he'll show it to you. Have you ever stood at the cross with the man hanging in pain, seen the look of love in his eyes? Then I say, you've seen Jesus my Lord. Have you seen Jesus my Lord? He's here in plain view. Take a look, open your eyes, he'll show it to you. Have you ever stood in the family with the Lord there in your midst, seen the face of Christ on each other? Then I say, you've seen Jesus my Lord. Have you seen Jesus my Lord? He's here in plain view. Take a look, open your eyes, he'll show it to you. Have you seen Jesus my Lord? He's here in plain view. Take a look, open your eyes, he'll show it to you.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us in our Wednesday night Bible class at the Boone Church of Christ. Tonight we're going to take a break from the parables that we've been looking at these past Wednesdays. We're going to spend some time talking about God. We're going to be discussing his character and his love for us. You know, whenever I read the Bible, I learn more and more about God's love for me. Don't you find that to be true as well? From creation to our redemption to the promise of eternity in heaven, God's unfailing love for us stands out. The prophet Jeremiah captures God's unfailing love this way in Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22 through 24. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning. I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance. Therefore, I will hope in him. God's love is unending, and without it, we'd be consumed. God's compassion is unfailing, so nothing will ever make God stop caring for us. God's faithfulness is great, and because he is faithful, he will never withhold his love and compassion from us. God's attitude is refreshing. He makes every day a new opportunity for us to see his love in our lives. This is great news, too, because as we know, life isn't always easy. We get worn out, and we need the strength to live. There's two important questions I would like us to think about tonight as we continue our discussion. And I think that our answers to these questions will reflect a great deal about the substance of our belief in God. First, do we believe that God will supply all of our needs? And second, do we live like we believe God will bless us with the strength to live? See, we know that there are people who will tell us differently. They will tell us that either God can't supply us with the strength to live, or they will tell us that he just won't. Tonight we're going to take a look at a familiar passage in the book of Isaiah. The people Isaiah prophesied to were being told that God either couldn't or wouldn't supply them with the strength to live. And here's the really dangerous part. The problem was is they were starting to actually believe it. So God sent Isaiah to speak truth to them. We're going to pick up in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 21. We'll read through verse 27. Haven't you heard? Don't you understand? Are you deaf to the words of God, the words that he gave before the world began? Are you so ignorant? Do you see what Isaiah is doing here? The first thing that the people needed was a reminder of who God is. So he is confronting them with their view of God. You and I need to be reminded of who God is. We need it from time to time as well. And so this is what Isaiah says to the people to redirect their focus back on God. God sits above the circle of the earth. The people below seem like grasshoppers to him. He spreads out the heavens like a curtain and makes his tent from them. He judges the great people of the world and brings them all to nothing. They hardly get started, barely taking root. When he blows on them and they wither, the wind carries them off like chaff. To whom will you compare me? Who is my equal? Asks the Holy One. Next, Isaiah reminds them that not only is God powerful, but that he is all-knowing as well. Look up into the heavens. Who created all the stars? He brings them out like an army, one after another, calling each by its name. Because of his great power and incomparable strength, not a single one is missing. O Jacob, how can you say the Lord does not see your troubles? O Israel, how can you say God ignores your rights? Isaiah is pointing out to them that God knows all of the stars in heaven. Everything that he created, he knows. And so how could they, the people, be questioning that whether or not God saw what they were going through and what they were experiencing? Isaiah says, of course he sees your troubles. Of course God knows what you're going through. Not only is God all-powerful and all-knowing, but God loves them. And he promises to supply them with the strength to live. Continuing now in verse 28. Have you never heard? Have you never understood? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all of the earth. He never grows weak or weary. No one can measure the depths of his understanding. He gives power to the weak and strength to the powerless. Even youths will become weak and tired, and young men will fall in exhaustion. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. See, not only did God desire to help them, he was infinitely capable of helping them. And they needed to hear this message. And you and I need to hear it as well. We can't ever forget that our Father not only loves us and understands the struggles in life that we face, but he can deliver us through them as well. He can supply us with the strength that we need to live. Isaiah tells them, and he tells us, that God is the source of our strength. So knowing this, shouldn't our focus be on him? Well, you notice where Isaiah starts here? Isaiah does start with God. The people are certainly hurting, but Isaiah doesn't begin with their problems. That's because the solution to their problems won't come from them. So Isaiah doesn't focus on the human condition. Instead, Isaiah focuses on God. He reminds them that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and infinitely full of love and compassion. What about us? When we're hurting, when we're struggling, where is our focus? It's quite often on ourselves and on our situation, isn't it? But our focus needs to instead be on God. If we are going to find the strength to live, we have to learn to be anchored in God instead of ourselves. You know, verse 28 is an important verse in all of this, reveals why we need to trust God for the strength to live. Isaiah 40, verse 28, have you never heard? Have you never understood? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all the earth. He never grows weak or weary. No one can measure the depths of his understanding. This one verse tells us what makes God especially unique and the only one who is able to help us. First, there is his eternity. He is everlasting. There is nothing beyond him. There is nothing that God hasn't seen. Second, there is his infinity. Where is God? He is everywhere. So there is no circumstance that can keep God's love from us. Third, there is his inexhaustibility. None of us are superhuman. Life can become overwhelming for us, but life never overwhelms God. Finally, there is his understanding. He sees all, he knows all, and he understands all. Paul captures those thoughts this way in Romans chapter 11, verses 33 through 36. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out. Who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? Who has ever given to God that God should repay them? For from him and through him and for him are all things. To him be the glory forever. God's understanding is limitless. Now, notice what Isaiah has said about all of this, and this part is really important for us to hear. We're going to look at Isaiah 40, verse 21, and we're going to look at the first phrase in Isaiah 40, verse 28. And just listen to what Isaiah is telling the people about God. Haven't you heard? Don't you understand? Are you deaf to the words of God? The words he gave before the world began? Are you so ignorant? And then in verse 28, have you never heard? Have you never understood? Do you notice the assumption in these words for God's people? They should have already known this. They should have already known about God. They should have already known about his power. They should have already known about his unlimited wisdom and knowledge and understanding. They should have already been aware of his love and compassion for them, his infinite love and compassion for them. They should have known this when they were struggling. And you and I should know this too. So when we're struggling, what are the lessons here for us? You know, I think there are really two lessons for us. First, God knows what we need, and he gives us the strength to match our needs. Isaiah 40, verse 31. Those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. You know, sometimes we need to soar above our problems. Sometimes we just need to run the race of faith. And there are times in life when all we can do is just keep on keeping on. No matter our particular needs, whether we need to fly, run, or walk, God will come to our aid. God's strength comes to us in just the right amount. And you know, one more thing, he'll never withhold it from us, ever. Paul again says this in Romans 8, 31 and 32. If God is for us, who can ever be against us? Since he did not spare even his own son, but he gave him up for us all, won't he also give us everything else? See, Paul's saying he's already given us Jesus. Won't he give us everything else? Won't he supply all of our spiritual needs? Of course he will. God knows what we need, and he'll give us the strength that we need. And also, God's strength comes to us at just the right time. This is the second lesson. God knows what we need, and he also knows when we need it. Help will come, but it won't come too soon, and it won't come too late. What do you suppose might be the most difficult part in all of this for us? Isaiah 40, the very first part of 31. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. Wait. Those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. Waiting for it. Waiting is what's hard. But you know, waiting here, the waiting as it's used here in verse 31, doesn't mean just biding our time. The waiting is active. Listen to the way these other translations word this phrase. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. Trusting, hoping, that's part of waiting, and it involves faith, and it involves an active faith that what God has promised us, he will do, that he will supply our spiritual needs at just the right time and in just the right way. God does love us. He loves us unfailingly, and he has told us this over and over in his word. He wants to supply our every spiritual need. Remember, he created us with his needs. He understands them. He knows that he's the one that supplies our needs, and he wants to do that for us. And not only does he want to give us the strength to live, he is infinitely capable of doing so. He is the only one who is, but we have to look to him and not to the world. Isaiah reinforced this truth when he told the people the following here in verse 26. Lift up your eyes and look to the heavens. Do you see where Isaiah is redirecting them? He's redirecting their focus. Yes, they have problems, they have struggles. He says, don't focus on yourselves. Don't focus on your challenges, on your struggles, on your obstacles. Don't focus on this world. Lift up your eyes and look to the heavens. And he says, who created all of these? He who brings out the starry host one by one and calls forth each of them by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. Remember, I asked the following two questions earlier. First, do we believe that God will supply our needs? And second, do we live like we believe it? Do we live like we believe that God will bless us with the strength to live? Isaiah makes it clear. The very same God that created the stars in the heavens is also the God of everyday living. He knows what our needs are. So let's decide to look to him to supply them. And let's not be taken in by the false promises of culture. Instead, let's determine to go to God's word and to learn his will. And let's resolve to come to him in prayer, to ask him to supply the strength that we need to live. He really does love us, and he's the only one who can provide what we need to live.
Trials dark on every hand, and we cannot understand all the ways that God will lead us to that blessed promised land. But he'll guide us with his eye, and we'll follow till we die. We will understand it better by and by and by.
And we're singing
By and by, when the morning comes,
You know
all the saints of God are gathering home. We will tell the story, how we've overcome. We will understand it better by and by and by. Oft our cherished plans have failed, disappointments have prevailed, and we've wandered in the darkness, heavy-hearted and alone. But we're trusting in the Lord, and according to his word, we will understand it better by and by and by.
we're singing
By and by, when the morning comes,
You know
all the saints of God are gathering home. We will tell the story, how understand it better by and by. Temptations in snares often take us unawares, and our hearts are made to bleed for some thoughtless word or deed. And we wonder why the test, when we try to do our best. We will understand it better by and by.
We're singing
By and by, when the morning comes,
you know
all the saints of God are gathering home. We will tell the story, how we've overcome. We will understand it better by